let's go through and label these. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Any questions on these? We are pros at these now. Good? Okay, so the next one we're going to learn about today, so we've learned parabola, we've learned circle. The next one is ellipses. So what constitutes an equation being an ellipse?
Same sign, different coefficient.
Same sign.
So what number 5 being ellipse?
And then different coefficient. So the standard form for an ellipse, I'm going to write it down here.
I thought the coefficient included the sign in front of it.
It does. So it has to be the same sign. Like they both have to be positive or they both have to be negative, but they have to be different numbers. Because if they were the same number, then they would be a circle. So the standard form for an ellipse is x minus h squared over a squared plus y minus k squared over b squared equals 1. And this is always true. It's always equal to 1 every single time. Where you have your center is always going to be at, can you guess it? HK. And you're going to take the opposite sign. And then your A is going to be your horizontal, kind of like a radius. So when you square root it, that's how many you go left and right from your center. And then B is going to be your vertical radius. It's how many you go up and down from your center. So basically, if you have, we're gonna draw a horizontal ellipse where it's like short and fat, and then we're gonna draw a vertical one where it's tall and skinny. And that just depends on like if your A is a larger number or if your B is. If you have a larger A number, then it's gonna be a horizontal ellipse. It's gonna be short and fat. And then if you have a larger B number under the Y, then it's gonna be tall and skinny. So if I had, for example, x minus 2 squared plus y plus 1 squared over 9 over 4 equals 1. Then where would my center be? 2, negative 1. So I'm going to plot that point. And then my A value, so how many I'm going to go left and right, is the square root of 9. 3. So I'm going to go right 3, left, and I'm going to go left 3. So left, right, 3. And then how many I'm going to go up and down is the square root of 4. So I'm going to go up and down 2. So up 2, down 2. And then connect all the dots. Do what?
So
Exactly.
The way that we determine that it's an ellipse on the test would be if it equals 1.
Most of them on the test are going to be where you complete the square to get it to equal 1. Which we're going to do in a second. So how you identify what kind of graph it is based on how we've been doing it so far. So on the test, it could be a big graphing section where they're all jumbled up, and then you have to determine what it is, complete the square, and then solve it. Everybody's here, except Tommy. Tommy. Okay, so let's try graphing this one. X plus 3 squared plus y minus 2 squared over 9 equals 1. Now this one's interesting because it doesn't have anything under the x, so what can I put there?
0, 1.
A 1.
Understood one.
I'm going to put it in a different color so you know to add it in there if it's not there. Okay, I want you to try graphing this one. Where's my center? -3, 2. And how many do I go left and right? 1. How many do I go up and down?
He is skinny boy.
And connect the dots.
Why he built like that?
So this would be considered a vertical ellipse, and then the one before that would be considered a horizontal one. So just basically which one has the longer axis, the vertical or the horizontal.
That is
So on the next page, we're going to get some practice completing the square. And we've already done completing the square with 2 variables, like doing it twice, so it's not any different. Except now you're going to have 2 different coefficients in front of x and y. So we're going to pull them out separately, okay? So I'm going to treat this. We're not going to divide by something first. All we're going to do is we're going to group the x's together. So I've got x squared and x. And I'm going to pull out a 25 from that. So I've got 25 x squared plus, when I take 25 out of 100, what do I have? 4x plus blank. Then I'm going to look at the y's. So I've got 4y squared minus 8y, and I'm going to pull out a 4. Because I want to keep the y squared in the parentheses so I can factor it. So plus 4 y squared minus 2y plus blank. And then on the right hand side equals -4 plus blank plus blank. So I'm going to take half of my x term, so that's 2, and square it. And then what goes in the next blank? 100, because I multiply it by the 25. Keep the 25 out front. Now I do the same thing for y. So what's half of -2?
-1.
And square it. 1. 4 times 1, so plus 4. So I have 25 x plus 2 squared plus 4 y minus 1 squared equals what? 100. So I've got this right here. But what we notice about all of these standard forms is that they equal 1. So my last step in this to get it to look like that is I divide everything by 100. Divide everything by 100. So divide this by 100, cancels out. Divide this by 100, divide this by 100. And what ends up happening when I simplify is I've now got x plus 2 squared. And what is 25 over 100 reduced to? What's going to go on the bottom? 4. And then y minus 1 squared. What goes on the bottom? 25 equals 1. So it's always going to work out nicely in that you've got something on the bottom and it reduces.
For any quiz or test, will we ever have something that doesn't?
No, it'll always work out nicely. So where will my center point be? So -2, 1. And how many do I go left and right?
2.
Left 2, right 2. And then how many do I go up and down?
Down 5.
Up 5, down 5. So what kind of parabola is this? Vertical. Tall and skinny. Vertical.
Oh, yours is so pretty.
I can feel the weight of your eyes looking at you said that.
Okay, so this is ellipses. Let's go ahead and turn to 10.5, hyperbolas.
This is so.
Wait, whoa, the question mark is very long.
So whenever you see something like this, we don't really talk about the vertices, co-vertices, and all of that because it gets a little confusing. So whenever you're, like, what I would suggest on something like number 7 is to plot these points, then find a center point. So like what's between -3 and -9, go to that point. And then on the other side, it says major axis length of 8. So if you've got this center point and you've, drawn your other ones, if you've got a length of 8 on the other axis, then how many would I go out on each side? 4. So you go out 4, 4 to the left and the right. Once you've drawn your picture, then you can create an equation from that. Okay?
So
it's
how
not
do we
8.
know which is the major axis?
It doesn't matter. Like if it said major or minor, it wouldn't even matter. It's just the opposite direction. So these are going up and down. Because if I plot them, they're vertical with each other, right?
So vertices, an axis
how do you
is
get
something
four?
that is parallel to them.
Well, it would be perpendicular from whatever it'd be perpendicular from whatever they give you.
Okay.
So if they give me those 2 points, then
They're supposed to be horizontal.
-9, 4. No. They have the same x. -3, 4.
They have the same
They're
line.
the same Y.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. So,
They're just inverse.
yeah, if this were -3, 4, and -9, 4, like that, then this point would be what? Like, what would the center be?
-6.
-6, 4.
And then it would go
So
out.
this is like my center,
Go right,
-6,
3 left,
4.
3 up, 4 down, 4.
Wait, how do you get the length of 8 to be 4?
So whenever it gives you the length of an entire axis, it's like the span of the whole thing. So from one point all the way to the other. Okay? So if this whole thing were 8, then to get from the center to the outside, it would be 4. So if I'm going up 4 and down 4, then what points would that put me at? -6 if I go up 4, -6, 8, and then -6, 0. So once you have that picture, and it's beautiful, right? Once you have the center and then the lengths of your, like from the center to the outside,
Right.
you just square those numbers, and then you create your equation from that.
This weekend, I made like Minecraft.
So here's this. Y'all are pros at this now. Hyperbolas, I'm going to show you how to draw it and what they look like. And there's 2 different ways. But how do we know something is a hyperbola, first of all?
Same sign, different.
Different signs. And can they be the same number?
Yeah, sure.
They can be the same or different. It doesn't matter. But one has to be positive, one has to be negative. Okay? So the way that you determine standard form, there's 2 different ways, and I'm going to draw 2 different standard forms, okay? So the first one is if your x is positive. So x minus h squared over a squared plus y minus k squared over b squared equals 1. Or not plus, sorry, minus. So if the x is positive, then it is considered a horizontal hyperbola, where it's the same rules apply. HK is your center, A is how many you go left and right, B is how many you go up and down. But we're going to draw it a little differently. So I'm just going to do this one first, and then we're going to go back and do the vertical one. So if I had something like x minus 1 squared over 4 minus y plus 2 squared over 1 equals 1. Then where would my center be? 1, negative 2. How many would I go left, right?
2. No.
Yep.
Okay.
How many would I go up, down?
1.
1. So instead of connecting the dots and making an ellipse, what actually happens is we create this dashed rectangle.
What?
And our hyperbola, is horizontal. So that means that it goes left and right. And we draw it like 2 U's.
What is this?
What is this?
Like that.
This is gonna be easy. This is the exact same
The reason
thing.
why we make our rectangle like that is because technically what they should be doing, like to know how wide or how narrow they are, is that they follow like you don't need to draw these, but they follow a diagonal like this. So if I had a really tall and skinny, a tall and skinny rectangle, then they would be a super wide U. It's like having 2 parabolas. You don't need to draw the diagonal, but do draw the rectangle. Okay. And it all determines, so it doesn't matter which number is bigger. Like these numbers don't matter which one's bigger or which one's not. In this equation, it only matters which letter is positive.
Do the arrows ever go on top or bottom?
Yeah, so I'm going to draw another one. So that was a horizontal if the x is positive.
I'm a genius.
A vertical is going to look like y minus k
Let us get
squared over, you can still call it b squared, minus x minus h squared over a squared equals 1. I'm sorry if you can't see that because it's purple.
Over what? Over what?
This is if the y is
This is if your y is positive.
and it's vertical.
And this one is going to be a vertical one, yeah.
So wait, for all the ones with the little parabolas, or
I don't know what they are on the sides.
Mm-hmm.
they have to touch the point.
Yeah. So their vertices are like here and here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same equation, I'm going to flip it. So what if the y were now positive and we had y plus 2 squared over 1 minus x minus 1 squared over 4 equals 1.
So
My center is still where? 1, negative 2. So the HK, it always goes x and y.
So then are we going up?
I still go left and right too. So my rectangle is going to look identical. I go up and down 1. Make my dashed box. But now my parabolas are going to be doing what? Going up and down.
How'd you know?
Because the y is positive.
Where? That tone right there.
And they should be about as wide as my diagonals. And they don't need to be perfect.
I forgive you.
But that's why we make the rectangle, to see how wide or how narrow my my graph will go. Okay, so completing the square is the same as we've been doing, okay? So in this case, which one's negative?
The negative is
The y. So we'll write it second. So I'm going to complete the square like we know how to do, right?
Imagine not.
So I've got 25, pull that out front. X squared plus what? 4x plus blank. Then I pull out a negative 4. Y squared. What comes next? Minus 2y
Plus
plus blank equals 4 plus blank plus blank. Okay, I want you guys to finish the rest. Okay, so we have x first. Where will our center be?
-2, 1.
-2, 1. So I'm going to plot that. How many do we go left, right? 2. How many do we go up, down? 1, 2,
Since the
3,
y
4.
is not.
And this is a tall, skinny guy. But where am I like hyperbola? Where is it gonna go?
The sides.
Is it gonna go on the sides or is it gonna go up and down?
Up and down.
Which one goes first?
Sides.
On the sides because why?
The y is negative.
Yeah. So the x is first. The x is positive. So and is it gonna be super wide? Yes, because my diagonals are so wide.
I don't have to draw a diagonal, right?
No, you don't have to, but it helps to know how wide it's going to be.
That's fine on the G.
You wouldn't, because here's the thing, I wouldn't want you, and I would be upset with you and count off points if you drew it like that. Because why would I have such a big rectangle if my parabolas are going to be doing that?
Because it's
They're
cool.
not. They're not going to. It's going to be super wide because you're following the diagonal of your rectangle.
But the diagonal is
It's like the x that your rectangle makes.
Wow.
Okay, next one.
Yeah, the last one.
Now, next one, which one is negative?
the negative is the x.
The x, so it's going to be a vertical hyperbola.
So this is just the first negative you see in the problem.
It's like whichever one's negative. All right, okay, I want you to try number, I guess it's number 6, very strange. I want you to try this one start to finish.
Okay.
Oh, wait. I did this wrong.
Whoa.
On the right-hand side,
Yes,
and then you divide.
and then it flips which one is
Mhm.
negative.
Oh, that,
Okay.
that is one.
Yeah,
I
so
did it wrong.
Courtney brought up a good point. If for some reason on the right-hand side I ended up with a negative, like I ended up maybe with a -4. So when I divide by -4, every single sign flips. So this now becomes negative, this becomes positive. In that case, I would just switch them and put the x first and then the y. So then it would be a horizontal hyperbola. So if every sign ended up flipping, you would just switch the order. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, so number 9 and 10. This is what I was talking about with the asymptote thing, just the diagonals. So I'll do number 9 with you, and then you guys can do number 10, okay? So on number 9, it says write an equation of a hyperbola in standard form that has vertices at 5 and -5. And those are like our 2 points that we stem the hyperbola from. So my suggestion when I'm doing these kinds of problems is to just draw a picture. So here's my beautiful graph. I have vertices at 5 and -5. So about 5 on each side. And since they're on the same horizontal line, that means that this is going to be a what kind of hyperbola? Horizontal. So that means the x is going to come first. And then it says that the equations of the asymptote are plus or minus 1/5 x. So if I were to graph that line, like y equals 1/5 x and y equals -1/5 x, what would that look like? Up 1 over 5, and is there any y-intercept? It's just at 0. So up 1 over 5, like that. And then -1/5 would be down 1 over 5. So it would look like that. So then my rectangle is going to look something like this. Isn't that beautiful? Nifty. Where I've gone left and right 5 from my center. But how many have I gone up and down? Just 1. Because it's like I went up 1 over 5 and then down 1 over 5.
How do you know the direction of the arrows? Just so I don't get that.
It's like a positive slope means up and to the right. Like it's looking like that.
No, I know.
Like when you draw it off the
These
ground.
arrows.
Oh, wherever my vertices are. But it doesn't even ask me to draw a picture. But it's wherever it tells me my vertices are is where they stem from. So if I go left and right, gets a horizontal, then it's a horizontal. If my vertices were at 0, 1, and 0, -1, then that would mean it's a vertical one.
What if they were like at vertices at 0, 4, and then 0, -4, and like, I don't know, equations of the axis?
Yeah, that's number 10. Okay,
Y equals-
so I know it's a horizontal, so that my x is going to go first. And my center is 0, 0, so it's just going to be like x squared, because there's no, it'd be like saying x minus 0. So x squared over what? How did you get 25?
It's to the left and right 5.
And then I square it. Minus y squared over 1 equals 1. Good. And it always, you just add this equals 1 at the end, always.